All right. Do I have everyone's attention? We might just take seats and get cracking. All right, I'll kick it off. My name's Lee Cox. I'm a volunteer with the Independence for Canberra movement, and it's fantastic so many people could make it today. Just a brief, if I can, an acknowledgement of country to pay my respects to the elders, both past, present, on the lands that we meet today. So thanks for coming. This is our second candidate endorsement town hall that we're running. We're running 3 of these. So this evening you'll get to hear from 7 different candidates, 5 different candidates, thank you. 5 different candidates in 2 electorates. Kurrajong first and foremost, and then we'll go to Murrumbidgee as well, which covers Woden. So obviously this group came together just briefly out of a desire to see some positive change in the ACT, and so over the course of the past 6 or so months, there's been a core group of people having conversations every day about the good things in Canberra, but the things we want to see more of. And I suppose over the course of the last few months, we've been gradually talking with community members about their views about Canberra and hearing from people who are interested in putting their hands up. And so this is really that next stage in the process where we get the opportunity to hear from a bunch of talented, very diverse and professional people about why they want to run as independents under the Independent for Canberra banner. So how this is going to work, so each candidate will get 7 minutes to give you a bit of a pitch, tell you a bit about them and why they're doing this, and we'll follow that up briefly with 18 minutes of Q&A. They're weird times, but it's really so we have 25-minute blocks, and Malcolm will kindly do the roaming mic if needed for people. At the conclusion of the event tonight, a core committee will get together and have a conversation about each of the candidates, but really important in that process is feedback directly from you, and there's a couple of ways you can provide that. So we have an anonymous box that I built at work today. It's literally just a cardboard box. Please give us your feedback there. Or, of course, speak to one of the people on that committee. I might just see if Malcolm and Danny are here, can raise their hands. By all means, speak to them as well if you've got views that you're prepared to share. And lastly, you can contact us by email as well, and we'd love to hear that feedback from you. I might leave it there, actually, and really just kick this off. So I might start by introducing the first candidate this evening who's going to come up and speak to you, and that's Tom Emerson. So come on up. I'll read your bio as you're walking. Yeah. So a bit about Tom. So Tom Emerson is a proud Canberran who is passionate about healthy communities. Tom struggled with chronic pain starting in his late teens, leading into the study of human movement. In 2017, he founded Canberra's first movement studio, Praxis, to share his learnings and build a community around being well. While continuing to run his studio, Tom began working as an advisor to Senator David Pocock in 2022, having been inspired by his people-first approach to politics. In 2024, Tom co-founded Independence for Canberra, this group, with the goal of reinvigorating local politics and bringing the community independent movement to the ACT Legislative Assembly. Tom holds a first-class honours degree in philosophy from the ANU and was Dux of St Edmund's College, Canberra. He lives in Dixon with his wife and 2-year-old son. Over to you, Tom.
2 rounds of applause. Thank you all so much for being here. It's exciting to be in a room full of people who care about Canberra. I'm here seeking your support as an independent candidate running for the Legislative Assembly this October. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Ngunnawal country and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land for caring for this beautiful place we all call home. And to also thank those of you here for your part in making our city what it is. I really do feel so fortunate to live in Canberra. There's no place I'd rather live. And I'm especially thankful to live here in Kurrajong. I went to school at St Edmund's College in Griffith, studied down the road at ANU, started a small business over in Campbell, and as Lee said, now live in Dixon with my wife and our 2-year-old son. I think this is a special part of the world, and I think we should be doing everything we can to keep it that way. maybe make it even more special. Over the last few months, I've focused my attention on pulling people together around this movement under the banner of Independence for Canberra. And when given a chance to speak, I've chosen my words carefully as a spokesperson for the group, wanting always to keep what we're doing open and inclusive to anyone who wants something better for our community. I haven't really focused on my own interests or beliefs because I've not wanted to exclude people who perhaps don't share them. And I've taken that approach because I think we need a more inclusive kind of politics. A kind of politics that brings people together, hears arguments from all sides, and focuses on constructive collaboration rather than throwing stones across the aisle. But it's nice to have an opportunity to speak not as a spokesperson, but as a prospective candidate, and to speak about what I believe. I studied philosophy because I believed I'd be better able to act in the world if I could think critically about it. I started a movement studio in Canberra because I believed I could help people in my community who, like me, were suffering from pain and injuries. I asked David Pocock for a job when he got elected to the Senate because I believed in him as a person of integrity, and I believed what he was doing was fundamentally good. And I'm standing here because I come across so many people who feel forgotten by this government. And I came to believe I had to do something about it. What else do I believe? I believe we're facing crises on multiple fronts. We're facing a mental health crisis. Many people, especially young people, do not feel the future is bright for them. They don't feel agency over their lives. They feel anxious, depressed, and that they're not able to play a role in building a better future for themselves. They feel distant from the people around them, lacking the kind of community connection we really need to thrive as humans. We talk a lot about mental health services, which we do need to invest more in. What I don't see is our leaders talking about root causes. Why are so many people in our community unwell? And what could we do to turn things around, to help people be well and give ourselves hope for the future? These aren't questions I hear being asked, let alone answered by the people that we pay to make decisions on our behalf. The people who really need to be grappling with these kinds of questions. And I believe that's because we're facing a crisis of leadership, where politicians focus more on themselves than on those they represent, where their interests and the interests of their parties come before our interests, where decisions are made for the sake of the next election, rather than on the basis of what's best for us all in the long term. But of course, this is not something our leaders are willing to admit, because we also face a crisis of integrity, where what these people do rarely matches what they say, where announcements are made and never followed through on. If anything, they're just re-announced a year or two later with a different name, and a year or two later after that once again, and where the person in charge does not take responsibility for failing to deliver on their announcement. We're also facing a growing crisis of fairness, where secure housing has become a distant dream for entire portions of the population. I don't think we're offering a fair deal to people, especially young people. So coupled with the climate crisis, we shouldn't be surprised that they're not hopeful for the future. The system's not working. Too often the fortunate few are failing to do what's right and to do what's needed to increase the fortunes of all. It's not okay that we live in a city where housing, healthcare, and quality education are increasingly available only to those who can afford it. That's not the Canberra I believe in, and that's not the Canberra I want for my son. It's not all doom and gloom. I also believe that we can solve our problems. I don't believe that we're victims of history. This is the incredible thing about democracy, is that we can come together and work to create a better future for our kids, for everyone's kids. And I believe there's no better place to tackle these crises than here in Canberra, because I believe Canberrans do care about people. We have a strong social conscience and high ethical standards. We expect ourselves and each other to do what's right. And we have the resources to solve these problems. The ACT is a smaller jurisdiction with one level of government that could move quickly. We have the highest median income in the country, and there's a real social license here to show ambition when it comes to pushing for progress. We're innovators. We have a highly educated, highly skilled population, ready and willing to offer their expertise, to help source the best available evidence, and to come up with solutions that work. But we're lacking the political leadership needed to strive for a truly world-class Canberra. I believe we need a government that's focused on realising Canberra's potential, that's making decisions to build our city into a place where we lead the nation, rather than dragging our feet and falling behind other jurisdictions. We should be looking at best practice from across the world, piloting new ideas and leaning on all the skills and expertise we have here in our nation's capital to get on the front foot, confront these problems together as a community. We can make Canberra a model city that others seek to emulate. A city designed specifically to help us be well and live full lives, where nature and people thrive together. We need to be making decisions now and taking actions now to achieve a vision for this beautiful home of ours that gives us all what we want from it. If we do that, I believe we can make sure Canberra remains the most livable city on the planet, not just for those who can afford it, but for everyone. These are some of my beliefs, and speaking with people across our community, I don't think I'm alone in holding them. My hope for this movement is that together we're able to act on these beliefs and on your beliefs about what's best for us. That's what this is all about. It's about a kind of politics where what we believe needs doing is done. We think Independence for Canberra can bring this to the Legislative Assembly this October, but we need your help to prove us right. So please get involved, share with us your beliefs, and be part of the change we're pushing for this year. Thank you.
Jump straight into questions.
What I'm looking for, I mean, like many people, I'm disillusioned with the Labor Green government. There's no way I vote for the Liberals. But what I'm looking for are concrete policies to solve issues like a terribly poor standard of development, the terribly poor standard of development in this city, the very poor education system that is leaving particularly poorer children behind. That is what I would like to hear from you, and obviously I'd like a continuation of climate policies and, if possible, even better climate policies. So what I want to hear from every one of you is, what are your concrete policies?
Thank you. Great question. We didn't come to this thinking we would know all the solutions to the problems. But what I've seen is that we don't have an acceptance that there are problems with the current government. And I think a lot of people feel the same way as you do in a lot of the areas that you mentioned. What we would be doing is talking about the problems and starting to look for solutions. I think the expertise is here. I'm not here to say that I've got the answers to all of the questions. I'm not an expert. The model that we're taking is one where we come and speak with communities, speak with people about what they want us to prioritise, like the things that you raised, and then speak with experts and develop policy on the basis of that. So if you're expecting each of the people who comes up to speak tonight to have concrete policy solutions today, I don't think you're going to get that. We've got people who are coming from outside of politics, who are bringing their experience and expertise from outside of this arena and looking at problems and saying, how can we have these problems where we're not even admitting that they exist, or the government, I should say, is not even admitting that they exist, and tackling the problems. So I don't want to disappoint you, but I feel like I am by saying, but it's the honest truth. We don't have the policy positions today. That's the focus over the next period. We've been focused on speaking with people about what they want prioritised, and they include the things that you mentioned. And then we'll come out with policy positions as independents, and this is an important thing also for everyone to understand, is the role of an independent is different from the role of a major party, where you're expected to be in government, making decisions and having concrete policies across the board. I suspect we'll have a few key policies in some of the key areas like housing, healthcare, education that you mentioned. Also environment is something that comes up often. But it's not my role to say what they are on behalf of the group, because this is about a platform for independence. So we'll have better answers to your questions in a couple of months.
Very nice speech, man. Very much impressed. You got my vote already.
Next question.
But
Thanks,
I
Vijay.
don't live
Great.
in the electorate. 2 questions, mate. Look, number 1 is, what's your plan for the next 4 to 5 months? And how can we help you in achieving your success or your goal? So how you are going to combine all these synergy here and get the optimum result? So what's your plans for the next 5 months, in short?
So thank you. The next 2 months, like I was just saying, is going to be focused especially on policy development. We're planning to pull together policy forums on specific issues, pull together experts and receive community input. And it's really those two things that we're using to develop our policies. It's not ideology or something that we've dreamt up behind closed doors, or even focusing on what will win votes, but actually focusing on what the community wants focused on, and then pulling together expert views and implementing them, which is something that we're not seeing as much as we might. So that's the plan for the next couple of months especially, and then get out and have as many conversations as we possibly can with people across the city. My sense is that a lot of people feel similarly to you. They've always voted Labor or Greens, don't want to vote Liberals, but would love to vote for something else. I've also heard from people who have voted Liberal for a long time and don't see them as a viable alternative. That's what we're here to try to offer. But we need to have a lot of conversations to get there. And I'm really confident in the people that we've pulled together under this banner already, and you're going to hear from more of them tonight, that what we do have is people with integrity and people who actually have values, and to use an old term that we've been speaking about, virtues that they're interested in bringing to the table here to focus on delivering the outcomes we need. So how you can help is coming along to those events, spreading the word about those events. We'll be doing all sorts of, kind of standard campaigning stuff, being down at the local shops, speaking with people about what they care about. And then importantly, not just saying, well, we've been out speaking with people about what they care about and here are our policies that we already had in our back pockets, but actually developing policies based on that and updating our views as those conversations happen. So there'll be substance to the conversations rather than just vote for me because I'm a great bloke kind of conversations. I hope that helps. I mean, if you're not already subscribed through the website, you do that, independenceforcanberra.com. There's a volunteer. We'll get in touch with you, and we really need a lot of help to get the word out about what we're trying to do. Thank you. Thanks. Good question.
We've all been amazed at the success David Pocock has had for the people of Canberra in one short period of time. And given that you've been inspired by him, and in some degree you'll know exactly how he goes about it, how has he inspired you to be able to make great change almost immediately?
What I find most inspiring about Senator Pocock, is that he actually does listen to and it sounds like, cliche, but that he actually does go into conversations with an open mind, ready to change his mind if he hears something that would make him change his mind. But then also on the back of that, he works incredibly hard, and the whole team works hard to try to deliver outcomes and actually produce results. One of the things that I think has been inspiring with the independent movement more broadly, and also with my boss, current boss, is speaking about issues that the major parties do not want to speak about, because they're protecting their own interests and very much focused on power. But, in his case, he's had a career. He's got whatever you get out of that, he's got it. He's got status, etc. He's not focused on that. So he can just focus on the job at hand. And that's what I feel that we have with the candidates that we're pulling together as well. That's something that we'd really love to carry forward, is people who aren't focused on power, aren't focused on their careers and career progression. I mean, the great thing about it as an independent is you can't get promoted. So there's nothing, there's no point in focusing on that. You can actually focus on the job at hand. Something that has happened though briefly is being in that office and just feeling like, if there was on the other side of this conversation, because so many of the issues that get raised are local issues that the ACT government has a say in. If there was just someone on the other side of that conversation who could pick up the slack and do the same sorts of things in the Assembly, then we'd be getting better results here. And that's been the inspiration for me, was realising that's not going to happen unless someone goes and does it. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Hi, Thomas. Fantastic speech. You know I'm very much on about the same things and believe in what you're doing. But we were amazed getting Senator David Pocock into power, and it was a tough ask. I think the job you've taken on is a much tougher ask. So I was just wondering, how pragmatically can you get over Labor and the Greens are expecting to be voted in, even though they're unpopular because the Liberals have done nothing. But the thing is, a lot of people in Canberra are going to vote Liberal, Labor or Green, no matter what happens. How are the independents actually going to get in with a chance?
Well, I feel like in some ways you've answered your own question. I mean, if it's voting for people who are not delivering and the other side's not a viable alternative, that's our option. It's not a very appealing one. What I'd really love for us to present in every electorate is someone who a couple of people who we can get behind and say, I'm not just voting this way because I know I'm supposed to or because I have to go in and vote and I'm not paying attention, but I'm voting in this way because I'm excited to vote this way. I agree it's a big task, it's a big ask. We need half the number of votes that David got. We don't have half the number of, wallaby caps or whatever else that David had. So it's, there's a lot of work to do. But the reason that I've started doing this and come to this was having had enough conversations with people who have said exactly what you said earlier and exactly what you're saying. No one that I've spoken with has said, oh, independence, why are you focused on that? We've got a great government, we're happy with how things are going. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that response, right? Like no one's saying that. So there's a key hole right there. We just need to be strategic about building the right key and feeding it in the hole. So that's the goal. I think we can do it, and we've got people who are ready to work their butts off and try to make it happen. What I didn't want to do was get to the day after the election, end up with the exact same composition of the Assembly, and spend the next 4 years working for David, wishing that someone had done something about it. So that wasn't something I was comfortable with doing.
Hi, thanks. I guess I've come tonight because I see it as a bit of a job interview. And so what I've heard you say is that you want to do the job differently. There's a job available, it's called being an MLA, and you'd like to do it differently, and you'd like to make policy in different ways, and you'd like to represent people in different ways. So I was wondering if you could just talk to us a bit more about what you think that looks like, being a different sort of MLA, and what skills and experience you have to bring to the job. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Big part of it for me is just actually being active and available in the community and accessible to people because you want to update your views based on what you've heard. I don't think the major parties are really able to do that. Sometimes they do it, and this is something that I've seen, but then they're not able to update their views or update their party's views, and then you become cynical about politics, and that's something that I think we see a lot. There'd be people in the room. I know there are people in the room, for instance, with the planning reforms that came through last year that did an insane amount of work to provide input into that policy development process. Community councils, the Conservation Council, many others. And then at the end of it, nothing was incorporated, and that just switches people off politics. So that's not what I would be doing, or what we would be doing. Instead, would be accessible and actually updating our views based on what people are hearing. Some of the other things that I'd really love us to pursue are really getting behind local initiatives. We've seen some recent examples. Actually, one recent example is what was happening with Canberra United, the Save Canberra United campaign, where the community really gets behind something. In that case, the ACT government did come through. I'd argue they probably they shouldn't have had to wait for that group to raise 70 grand before the government decided to chip in. But I've heard from a lot of people who are doing great things already in their communities, whether they're community organisations, business owners as well, and they just don't feel support from the government. I think we can be a bit parochial when it comes to Canberra-based, businesses and organisations, and really get behind those things. So that's another thing that I'd focus on. For me, what's most important to me, I think, is that people have at least one representative that they feel that they can speak with and who takes them seriously, who actually wants to know what they have to say, because there's no other way to represent people than speaking with them. And there maybe are some representatives, like perhaps some of you have interactions like that with your local MLA and you feel that's the case. It's not been the feedback that I've been receiving, and so that's the main thing that I'd really love to change. I hope that answers your question.
Hi there, thanks. That was really good. You've spoken a couple of times already about the experts that you would be talking to bring into the conversation. I know at the Commonwealth level, a lot of the departments around town are teaming up with ANU and producing some work together. Do you have some sort of approach with other think tanks or universities around who the experts might be? Are you able to talk to that a little bit?
Great question. It's not something we've come to yet. We're a volunteer organisation, all working mornings and nights after hours, outside of office hours. But what I've seen in Senator Pocock's office is that experts really want their advice to be taken. And when they discover that someone actually wants to use what they have to say productively and put it into action, they're more than willing to provide that input. So that's something that we have seen at ANU and from other think tanks across the country in that case, which maybe might not be the case here. But I think there's a whole lot of knowledge within the community where, we're a city of experts and people will probably tell you they're experts, and maybe I'm not sure whether they have the qualifications to say that, but there is a lot of experience and knowledge in the community that I think we can draw on if people are willing and able to willing to provide it. So the answer to your question is no, we've not got our list of experts. We've got some people who have experience, including within ACT government in the ACT Public Service, who would like to provide input and guidance for us on how we could solve some of these problems. That's a really key part of this next couple of months, but then, in an ongoing way after that.
Hello, thanks for coming out tonight and talking to us. I found it really interesting to hear that you're a philosopher, because you don't really see many of those these days. So I was quite curious, what philosophy summarises your vision for Canberra?
Oh. All right. What I came to realise when I was studying was philosophers do a lot of thinking, which is really fantastic. Some of them get to the point of acting, and some of them don't. Some of the philosophers I was studying came to the realisation that it's very difficult to change a system if the individuals within it haven't changed first. So I suppose my philosophy is that we can empower individuals to change in the way that they'd like to change, and that it's the classic, be the change you want to see in the world. But I think it goes back to what I was saying in my speech is I don't think people feel that, that they're able to actually build more of the life they want. And some people have that experience, and especially here in Canberra, if you already have some of the life you want, it's easier to get more of that. But I think especially young people, I just don't see that that being the case. So what am I trying to say? I think that there's a huge amount of potential in all the people in the room. I think there's a huge amount of potential in this city, and I suppose my philosophy of everything is that we should be looking at the potential and focusing on that and leaning into that in a way that's kind of exciting and open to what's possible for us in the future. What I've seen, even in my my work with Praxis and the Movement Studio, is that can be really transformative for people, and some of them are in the room. Thanks, guys, for coming out. It can be really transformative to just have an experience of actually feeling that you have agency in the world and power over your life. I don't see why politics can't give people that, but it seems to give people the opposite. The feeling that there's politics over there and my life over here, and those people that we elected and that we're paying to represent us and do what we want just aren't doing it, And so one of the things that I'm excited about is trying to connect with the people who have never paid attention to politics. Kind of goes to your question from before, Steve. It's the vast majority of people in Canberra who don't even know if there's an election on this year, right? They don't know any of their MLAs. And politics could be an exciting thing that we use to transform our society, our city, for the better. I'm a bit maybe naive and ambitious on that front, but it's what I believe. And even in the small little ways can make a big difference. That initial experience of maybe one of the community council members or someone else has a view and then it's actually actioned on. This is something that I've seen in Senator Pocock's office, is it really gives people faith again in the political system. It gives them a feeling of, I do have a voice and what I say does matter and I can actually affect what's happening in the world around me. So maybe that answers your question. We can talk more philosophy later if you like. Oh, we're at time. I think we're at time. Oh. Yeah, well. No Dorothy Dixes. Oh, that was the Dorothy Dixer, yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Just thank you so much for being here, and just please remember with all the candidates, this is a big thing for people to get up and speak and be judged voluntarily. What are we thinking? So, I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the candidates for being willing to do that. So good on you, honestly.
Yeah, good on you. Good on you. Terrific. All right, let's go straight into the next person. So Sarah Poggett. Sarah's a dedicated resident of Canberra, where she operates a small business in the bustling Braddon area. Her home in Red Hill is shared with her son and a lively menagerie of 6 pets. Wow. With a diverse background spanning volunteer work, design, arts, management and cooking, Sarah is a versatile individual. Sarah's commitment to her business, community and family, as well as her creative pursuits and love for quality family time, highlight her as a dynamic and caring individual within the Canberra community. Please, round of applause for Sarah.
Sorry, I should have walked up first. Don't start timing me, but Tom, that was amazing, and I apologise, I forgot my glasses, and this is also probably a really bad angle, so let's start. Hi everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of this land we are meeting on, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'd also like to thank Tom and the committee for the opportunity to speak to you, my fellow speakers, and everyone who has come along tonight. It's really exciting to see a community so passionate about building a strong, connected, and safe place to live through true representative democracy. My name is Sarah. I am... Oh. Is that all right? Sorry.
Streaming.
My name is Sarah. I am mama to my 5-year-old son Kai and the founder, owner and manager of a small business for the past 10 years. I would like to be considered as a candidate for Kurrajong, to be an authentic voice for you, our community, and I want to be a champion for change. It would be a privilege and an important duty that I will not take lightly. In fact, I relish the task of working arm in arm with other candidates and MLAs and experts to build a better future for us and the next generations to come. So why me? An important principle of the IFC is to be evidence-based. So first of all, I highlight, I am not an experienced politician. I follow politics with a lot of interest, and I feel that now is the time to get more involved. Every person in this room has recognised that voices from the heart of our community need to be properly heard and responded to. And I would like to put my hand up for the task of being a driving force for that change by working with others to make this happen. I will be learning as I go to some extent, but I am confident that I bring many qualities that could be utilised to support this community, and that is why I'm here. My personal journey to this stage has been shaped by principles of hard work, honesty, empathy, and integrity from my family and a long line of trailblazing women. This includes my great-grandmother Edith, who raised 9 children through 2 wars, my nonna Rose, who campaigned passionately for the forests in WA in the 70s and remained an advocate for Australia's environment until she passed last year. My auntie Helen, who sits upon multiple boards across Australia, and my mother Jane, who is a retired doctor, all raised me to believe that every voice, every single concern, and every perspective within our community matters. This is my foundation of my commitment to you. As a small business owner for the last 10 years and a single mother for the last 4, I have high aspirations for my family and have experienced firsthand many frustrations and challenges that individuals and families in our community face. These experiences have fueled my passion to work towards solutions that will empower and support my local Canberrans. I understand so many of the struggles we have because they are also my own. Canberra has been my home and inspiration for over 23 years since I moved from Perth at the age of 13. In Red Hill, I live with my son and 6 pets and next door to my wonderful mum. I am so lucky to be immersed in a diverse community with great people like my local butcher Tony, who I visit daily for a good snag or just a chat, and where we discuss the pressures his and my business faces. My incredible elderly neighbour across the road has no family here in Canberra. I love having him in for a chat and keeping an eye on him, and I would like to see people like him having the support he needs should he need it. We need to do more for our older and vulnerable population and ensure that they thrive. At 26, I decided to follow in my late father's footsteps and started up my restaurant in Braddon. The key to its success has been lots of hard work, continuously building a loyal, talented team around me and gaining wonderful customers who have now become great friends. I was very proud to win Australian Institute of Management's top 30 managers under 30 across Australia, as well as other mentions in papers and magazines. I've had some success, which I'm really grateful, but none of this has been easy. My small business remains a daily and challenging endeavour with rising staff issues and input costs and limited support, as it does for the many small businesses that bring life to this community. I know these challenges firsthand, and I will speak from deep experience for this community. But enough about me. I'd like to talk about Kurrajong and reflect on some areas that you as a community have said are concerning you. Firstly, we need safe, diverse, affordable and inclusive communities. As the second least affordable city in Australia to buy or rent and the highest rate of persistent homelessness in Australia, together with the highest rate of loneliness in Australia at 40%, there is considerable work needed to ensure our territory, local planning and services are adequately prioritised and delivered with our most vulnerable in mind. Despite spending in these areas, we are not seeing the results, and it is my intention to work to understand what is driving this persistent mismatch between our needs and the outcomes and how we can change it. Secondly, we need thriving businesses and grassroots organisations to connect our community. The heart of any community is the small businesses and vital community organisations that underpin our needs. Kurrajong is no exception. Canberra has unacceptably high rates of small business failure driven by outdated policy settings and lack of a cohesive vision for attracting businesses. We also have grassroots, mostly not-for-profit organisations that do not have adequate support, resources and recognition. I intend to work to ensure our local businesses and not-for-profit sector thrives and is able to deliver for the benefit of the people of Canberra. I also intend to advocate for a Canberra where climate conscious and environmental aware planning and regulations allows us to live in harmony with our precious, unreplaceable native bushland that we are guardians of. It's no secret that Canberra is expanding in unsustainable ways. We lack the events infrastructure needed to host major gigs and sporting events, and it is disappointing to see Australia's second oldest convention centre remain stagnant. Our needs for accessible modern transport infrastructure are not being met. We need future-focused planning that balances nurturing our environment and our community needs. I look forward to working with my colleagues, government and experts to understand and resolve this long-term issue for Canberra. These are just a handful of the many areas I know you seek a representative for, and I intend to listen intensely to understand your concerns and to upholding the values of the IFC, which I believe in and that I am committed to. Thanks to you all for taking the time to hear about me. It is really appreciated. I'm really excited to learn as much as I can about your aspirations and concerns and for the opportunity to serve you and our community. I look forward to hopefully working together to build a brighter future for Kurrajong and for Canberra as a whole. Thank you.
Questions?
Oh God, be
Questions
kind,
for
please.
Sarah?
Remember, no political background.
No, that's okay. If you can't answer this question, maybe Tom
sorry.
or someone from the committee could.
Sure.
There's been a lot of commentary about the major parties and people voting.
Yes.
Has Anthony Green or any psephologist started crunching numbers to predict how the independents might go?
Lee, have you? I wouldn't have a clue about that, sorry.
Probably one for you, Tom. Sorry to put you... Sure, no, you're right.
Good question, Hugo. No, I don't think he has. I may have seen some polling that was done, that there was a bit of a media around last year that suggested 50% of people who had voted Labor Greens in the federal election would consider voting independent in the territory election, which is pretty insane. That's a very high number, but it's something that we would actually love to, if you've got, you know, a few $1,000, love to fund some polling so that we can get a stronger sense of that. Okay, perfect. Speak to your wealthy friends.
Hi, thank you very much for your introduction. Just a quick question. You mentioned that every voice matters, there is a great diversity of voices and every voice matters. That's a pretty hard call to have a cascading priority list of voices. So which ones do you listen to amongst that?
I would listen to all, and I think what we are saying with the independents that absolutely every voice is heard, and we want to make changes and policies that include as many of these people as we can. Obviously, we can't do it for everyone. I mean, that would seem absolutely impossible to do, Tom, but a community as a whole. And it's not about our interests, it will be focused on yours and how we can change to make things better for you.
Hi.
You're inner south, aren't you? Did I hear that from Tom before?
I
There we
am
go.
inner south. Tom has heard a lot of my views on this. I've lived in the Kurrajong electorate for 20 years.
Yep.
In that I have had one MLA live south of the, or many of us who are here from Kurrajong have had only one MLA live south of the lake. We are not heard. And often,
yes, I agree.
and often ignored, but given your introduction, is your focus primarily a business focus as an independent and the Braddon revitalisation, or is
No.
it going to be on actually residential
Well, I think you
issues?
heard me. Yes, my local butcher, Tony, who I literally visit every day, I will pop my head in every day to check in. Inner South is really important to me. I've lived in Inner South since I was 13, so I grew up in my mother's house from 13 and moved next door later on. My son goes to school in Inner South. Obviously, I will have a lot of vested interest in making sure that Kurrajong as a whole is looked at properly and cared for.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you.
You do the tricky questions, so now you're making me nervous.
You mentioned you had a 4-year-old son.
5.
5, sorry. What are you concerned about most for his future, and what do you want to see his future look like here in Canberra?
I want him to have a future where I've heard so many stories about mental health in our younger generation, and it terrifies me to have to think that he may have to go through something like that. I mean, the other week I heard from a dear friend that a guy in his 20s committed suicide with a 1-month-old baby girl. This is not stuff that I want to be hearing about, and I think we're missing some big things, obviously, here in Canberra for allowing that to happen. Like, I would take responsibility for that if this was to come to fruition.
Hi there. Thanks for having the courage to get up and put yourself forward, so good on you. You probably heard me before ask Tom about what skills and attributes he thought he would bring to the job, so I'm
Yes.
interested in what your answer to that question is. Thanks.
I would have a circus tent load of empathy that is equally balanced with resilience. And I think someone in a political setting like this needs that, and to make sure that empathy and resilience align together, not just resilience. And I think what we've seen from past government is I'm not seeing much empathy given. So that's definitely a quality and skill I think I have. And I think just real life, you know, I slog it. I'm a small business owner and a single mum. And I'm absolutely dedicated to providing my time for this. And I wouldn't have put my hand up otherwise. Is that it?
Hi, thanks, and thanks for putting yourself forward. It's a terrific thing to do. I think you said something about some business management or financial training that you had as well. Is that something that you'd also bring? Did I hear you say that you had won a management award?
I did win a management award. Yes, I mean, managing staff for 10 years, hopefully you gain good leadership skills. So I believe I definitely carry that. Sorry, what was the rest of the question? Oh, just about finance. Oh, finance? Yeah, so I do know finance in general, but I wouldn't say as much as the experts would know. I'm definitely not calling myself an expert in finance.
I'm sure some small business finance management would come in very handy.
Yes, that is true. Don't give me a philosophy one, because I don't know.
No worries, I'll be easy on you. Thanks for coming out tonight as well.
Thanks for being here. This is amazing. It's so amazing, Tom.
It quite resonated with me that you mentioned loneliness is quite endemic, I guess, in Canberra.
Yes.
And I know within my age group and people younger than I am, the question often pops up. I see on online forums or chat groups or whatever, it's hard to make connections in Canberra. And
Very
I'm
hard in
just
Canberra.
curious about your perspectives and why you think that is and what can be done to address that.
Canberra, so I moved here when I was 13. I had my friendship group, and I think as I've gotten older, I've only been able to start making new friends, and I think that's mostly from my business, from meeting, Kim right there. She was a regular that has become one of my closest friends. As a single mother as well, it's lonely sometimes. And yeah, I think we need to provide the community in all ages just better choices of how to connect. And I think what we're failing in that is community-based. I would love to see something go on in Red Hill or Barton or Deakin or Braddon or, wherever, and just say, hey, we're doing this, coffee, we'll be meeting at this time just for a chat, let's connect. And that's something that I want to do as a potential Kurrajong candidate. Say, hey guys, I'm going to be here at this time. Come for a chat, tell me what you want, or just hang out. Because it does get lonely, and we all need to protect each other from that, from loneliness. I hope that answers it.
Sarah, you've decided that you're going to run in Kurrajong.
Yes.
You live in Red Hill, which is in Murrumbidgee. And
Red Hill is Kurrajong.
not anymore.
Oh, is it?
It's only just changed.
Oh.
And that's actually the reason I'm asking the question, because the way I see it,
Yes.
of the 5 seats, 4 really prominent MLAs currently running in Kurrajong. So Shane and Chief Minister, Health Minister, and Leader of the Opposition. It seems to me that there's 1 seat available in Kurrajong, and it'd be great if you helped Tom get elected because you ran there, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But have you actually thought about the possibility of running in Murrumbidgee, now that I've mentioned that you are actually in that other electorate?
Well, I wouldn't want to go against these beautiful candidates that are about to speak. I honestly was unaware that Red Hill does not preside in Kurrajong anymore. That is probably why Claire first said, do Murrumbidgee, to be honest. So yes, that's... I'm not sure how to answer that, because I don't...
It's okay.
Yeah. Thank you for stating the facts, though, and I'm so sorry that I was obviously incorrect, and clearly shows that my politics are not my strong front.
Would you consider Murrumbidgee?
Oh, that's something I need to talk to the team about. Yeah.
You don't have to. There is no law that stands against
Mm.
you. You can take that. Go away. Your vote cancel. I'll give it to her.
I guess, sorry, the answer to your question, though, is that I do love a challenge, and I think we're all up for the challenge. So we're all aware that Kurrajong is probably the hardest seat to get into, and we are ready, and we are guns blazing. So I'll do my. I'm very good with knife skills, so let's see how I go. Hugo, was it?
Yeah, Hugo. Yeah. Sarah, you mentioned about, and I think other people have commented about the loneliness. I recall one of the legacies from the centenary of Canberra was the parties in the shops thing, and that just seems to have gradually fizzled out.
Yes. So that's why we need to focus more on this issue, which is a big, like, Canberra, 40% of loneliness is really horrible.
Yeah.
Why? So my biggest questions for so many things about policy and the issues we have for Canberra is why? What is happening? Why is this happening? And why is it obviously taking so long for something to change? It is just, to me, is mind-blowing. But yes, I would love to bring that back. And I would do that at my restaurant. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'm not that tall. No, thanks to Sarah. And it's Chez Frederique in Braddon. If anyone wants to go in and get a meal, I just thought I'd give you a plug there, Sarah. No, really well done. All right, look, we'll keep rolling through. Thanks everyone for their patience. So we're going to move on to our candidates now who are interested in putting their hands up for Murrumbidgee, although there might be more. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so our first one is Nathan Naker, please. So a little bit about Nathan. Nathan's a dedicated resident of Canberra who is deeply passionate about our city's future. With a distinguished career in the federal public service in areas such as economics, communications, art, transport, health and the environment, Nathan is eager to bring his experience and his passion to the forefront and advocate for politics that prioritise the well-being and prosperity of all Canberra residents. He enjoys exploring the landscapes surrounding Canberra, spending time with his family and friends, and immersing himself in the many experiences that our city has to offer. Nathan has tertiary qualifications in information technology and data analytics and is currently near completion of his Masters of Business Administration. He lives in Denman Prospect with his wife and his two daughters who are with us tonight. Give it up for Nathan.
Good evening, everyone. There's quite a few of you here today. No, but thank you for having me. It's a privilege to come in and talk to you and answer your questions as a potential candidate for Murrumbidgee as part of the Independents for Canberra group. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Sydney, so don't hold that against me, but I moved to Canberra about 14 years ago. I followed my wife, well, my girlfriend at the time. She, like most of interstate Canberrans, came as a public servant graduate, and I missed it too much, so I made the move to Canberra from Sydney, and I haven't regretted it. I've fallen in love with Canberra. The contrast when I came here was, it was obvious. The people are nicer, the air is fresher, the facilities when I first came here, the transport was great. We lived in Greenway, we were renting in Greenway, and I worked in Belconnen, and 25-minute bus straight there, straight back in peak time, and it was great. Yeah, that's a true. I'll get to that. But even though it wasn't perfect, there was bulk billing doctors available to go see when I needed to. Driving around Canberra was great. The traffic was so much better than Sydney, and the parking as well. But while the air is still fresher and the people are still great, and there's nowhere else that I want to call home. Over time, I've seen the impact of ineffective government and leadership and its impacts on our community. My first exposure to this really was part of that transport in catching the buses. With the arrival of the tram, that's great. We're getting a tram for Canberra, sure. But it seemed there was a big focus on all roads lead to Civic, kind of forgetting about those suburbs, forgetting about those schools. I saw overnight cancellations of so many bus routes through the suburbs, through the schools. I saw communities get together and say, hey, look, my kid, he has to walk 2 extra kilometres just to get to school. My elderly grandmother, she has to catch 2 buses now to get her groceries. And it seemed like like nobody cared. It seemed like nobody was listening. It seemed like a government that was, we know what's better. This is the future. You know, this is how transport's going to look. Noting that most of us aren't going to see the tram, you know, for decades to come. Canberra Hospital. You know, before I had children, I was lucky enough not to have any memories of visiting emergency department. But after I had kids, you know, as great as they are, with kids comes a lot of, you know, new injuries, new illnesses, and a lot of visits to the ER. And what I saw there, you know, really disturbed me. You had people, you know, screaming and crying in pain, waiting hours to see a doctor. And by the time they got in to see the doctor, you know, they were more tried to get pushed out or treated as a number than actually treated as a patient. And I don't blame the doctors and nurses for that. It's epidemic of the system. You know, perfect example, earlier this year, my wife had a serious medical condition and we needed to go to the emergency room. And we knew, we've been to emergency rooms, like we're going to be waiting there for hours and overnight. But she needed to go. We went to a walk-in clinic. They said, no, you need an ultrasound. We don't do it. Go to the hospital. So we made the trip. After doing the usual wait, we finally got to see a doctor. And essentially they said, no, we don't do ultrasounds here at the hospital. Yeah, I know. They don't do ultrasounds here. Go to your GP. They'll give you a referral. That's what you need to do. And pretty much kicked us out. My wife in pain, a catheter in her arm. We're just leaving the hospital. Later we found out from a nurse that, no, they do ultrasounds. It was just that day they were too busy. And they just needed to get us out. The lines were too big. Now, you know, lucky it all ended okay. We had a great GP. She used the contacts to get us a quick ultrasound. But I just think, what if it didn't go right? And those emergency rooms, you know, it's not a new thing. You know, we have the worst ER waiting times in the country. And that's been happening for 5 years. 5 years ago, we had the same discussion and politicians came out last election cycle and promised new things and promised new buildings and extra funding for this and that. You know, no transparency of where that funding's going or how, if the outcomes are good or not. But they're not listening. They're not listening to the experts here. They're not listening to the doctors and the patients of the hospital. And there's a lot of things that could be done, you know, like bulk billing in Canberra. You know, I don't know about you guys. I don't know about you guys, but I save my ailments before I go see the doctor because I don't want to spend $100 out of pocket for each visit. So I build up a list. You know, then I go with it. Oh, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. You know, I don't want to go spend $100, get sent to a specialist. We have to wait another 3 months to spend another $300. And so this is not medical advice. You know, if you're sick, go see a doctor. I'm not saying do what I do. But how can we expect the ER not to be full of people if people can't afford to see the doctor when they need to? And, you know, there's answers, there's solutions to this. You know, the AMA, GPs, patients have been screaming about solutions to this, but I feel we just have a government who just seems to ignore them. We know best. We just want to make big statements and hopefully people will just forget about it. And this lack of consultation or even empathy is not just limited to our transport and health system, a broken public housing system. I read some stats today. 3,000 people on that waiting list. Of average of 5 years they have to wait to get a home. And it's gotten worse over the last 5 years. So while the population has increased, while that list has doubled on the amount of people on that, the housing stock of public housing has actually decreased. That doesn't make sense to me. You know, continuous delays in planning and broken promises. So I live now in Demnon Prospect with my family, and I just got to say, you know, Copeland's Crossing, police stations, shops, I mean, all that Molonglo region and Western Creek even, communities are screaming for more infrastructure, for better planning. We get a lot of promises and, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years later they'll start on the project when it's a bit too late, but no one's listening, I feel, and that's probably why I'm running. I do see hope, especially through this movement, through Independence for Canberra. You know, for too long we've been let down by this coalition of government that seems unwilling to listen, and an opposition that doesn't offer any viable solutions. These 10 principles that the party has pushed on candidates to have, and these values, you know, no vested interest, integrity, collaboration. Like, I wish some of the politicians currently had a half of that. They're more concerned about looking good than, actually helping people. When I saw these issues, I looked at how I'll be quick. When I saw these issues, I wanted to join up. I looked at the Liberal and the Labor parties and the Greens, but they're all the same. They're all, play those political games, have those vested interests. It's all about left versus right, about rich versus poor. It's not about helping people and collaborating with them. I'm not born into politics. I'm not president of some social club. I'm just a dad and a husband, living in the suburbs who just wants to make it a better place for my kids, for myself, and for my neighbours. And I've worked in public service, and I know it's hard to do these policies. I've worked in health and infrastructure and transport. It's hard to improve these things. But what's not hard is talking to people. What's not hard is collaborating. What's not hard is having some empathy. What's not hard is not wasting $78 million on a HR program that you'll never use. And hopefully with some independents in the ACT Assembly who live these 10 principles, we can start to hold the ACT government accountable for its actions. Thank you.
That was terrific, Nathan. Thank you so much for that. It's very hard to convince me to come out on a Tuesday night and dumplings at the Polish Club was the carrot, as so to speak. So coming on a night when they're not on the menu, there's not even a restaurant here. I mean, that really is commitment, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
So how do you think we can convince Canberrans to vote for independent?
Yeah, look, I think it was addressed a lot about the need for independence in Canberra. And I've seen the benefits that Pocock has had federally. I've seen, the rise of independence in places like Tasmania. When I was going around putting up posters for this event around my local shops to convince people to come, there was already, Labor and Liberal posters. They seem to be there forever. But people were asking me, what's this new thing when I was going to shops? What is this new independence? And I think people were keen. I think, similar to me, people were sick of the political fighting. I don't think we care about, whose side you're on or who's in charge. We just want actions. We want things done. And I think what independence brings is accountability. Whoever's in power, hopefully maybe there's the potential to hold that balance. But you could say, if you're doing something, do it. And if you don't expect our support. It's holding that accountability. And the Greens kind of try to play that position as that, middle party, and they complain a lot, but they're part of the government. They're ministers. They've got the Minister for Housing, Social Housing. That's gotten worse. So I don't see, currently the system as we have it, I think people are keen for something else. I think really it's just awareness, to say that we exist. And I think a lot of people will just be happy for something different. And you're all here today, so you're all eager, so that's a good sign. But thank you.
Hey, Nathan. You did a really good job. Yep, so you got a fan there even, so that's great. Nathan, you went through a couple of issues that are confronting Canberra, and that really resonated with the crowd, I found. So my question for you is, if you get elected, which of those issues are you going to address first?
Yeah, so to be fair, those issues are issues that, like I say, I've witnessed, I've lived in Canberra. There are other perspectives, and there's probably a million other issues that I haven't talked about that people do care about and probably will talk about soon. I think if there's accountability on decision making, I think that addresses a lot already. Decision making for every part or aspect of Canberrians' lives, I think that's a big part. But for me personally, I feel passionate about those things that, in the short term at least, affect people's lives and, their human rights, like the right to good health care, the right to a roof over your head. I think those are the major concerns. And, I get it. There are other issues with housing as well, and rental affordability and clearing land clearance and stuff like that. But when 3,000 people who have to wait 5 years for a place who desperately need it. I don't get that. $78 million, like I said before, that could build a few houses. That's a lot of GP visits for a lot of people. There were deaths at that hospital from the condition that it's in. And for a place like Canberra, I don't think that's acceptable. So look, my main concerns are things like that affect people, even the transport stuff that I mentioned before. But I don't think we should be limited to one thing. I think government can do more things than one thing at a time. And I think holding them to account, do the actions that you said, do the stuff that you promised. And if it didn't work, tell us about it. Don't, hide behind something else or blame the opposition or blame someone else. Take accountability. And I feel like an independent in Canberra can do that.
Hi, Nathan.
Hello.
From what I hear from you, you've got fantastic experience with evidence-based policy making and data and that sort of thing. You mentioned the importance of listening and empathy.
Yeah.
And so that's a different side of the coin. Could you tell us a little bit more about why that's important to you? From what I'm feeling, father of daughters, the things that are happening in women's experiences at the moment, a father rocking up at work with the bus timetable changing when he's trying to save for a house. These aren't evidence, these are listening.
So that's a good question. And I think there's a difference sometimes between, what's financially and economically makes sense, but what also makes sense for people and caring about people. And, look, maybe the new bus timetables, for example, maybe it makes sense. Maybe more people will catch it in the big scheme of things because everyone's living in the town centres, for example, all those huge apartments, and everyone's going to civic. Maybe that makes sense, but what I feel is still you have students, you have vulnerable people in the suburbs who rely on that service. And sure, maybe it's not thousands of them catching that service, but I think you still need to care about them and to consider how it impacts their lives. Like I said, those 3,000 people, that's not a huge voting block, I assume, and I assume that's why they're ignored a lot of the time. But it's empathy, and I think Canberra has that. We're a pretty progressive city. We seem to care about each other. I see all these marches about people trying to fight for each other's rights. I don't think we'll be against it. In the hospital, like women's pain, like there was a lot of articles recently about endometriosis and doctors and nurses and just the community in general understanding what women go through. And I don't want to put my wife on the spot, but I get that as a husband. And visiting that hospital at that time, even if we couldn't get the ultrasound, which still doesn't make sense as a hospital, but even if we couldn't get that, and even if they couldn't give us the service, no empathy. It's not their fault. I think they're just part of the system, that they've been given. But it's people treat it as a number. People treat it as just voters, sides, and it's a lot of division. And I think we're better than that, and we can care for each other. And I think sometimes empathy, over money sometimes. And that's a big thing to say. But when I see things about how we waste a lot of money in this government, how our procurement and contracting, even just the things we hear about, right? There's probably a lot of things we don't. I think there's enough there to help everyone.
Hi, Nathan. Quick question for you. The ACT Parliament right now is very white. Yeah. It's an incredibly white chamber, and that isn't an accurate reflection of the ACT or Australia at large. What value do you see in having someone who looks like you running for the ACT Legislative Assembly, and what do you think it means for a community that looks at the ACT Parliament and doesn't see themselves in it?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Diversity, I think, is important. I'm incredibly, maybe you can't tell, I'm incredibly nervous standing up here and talking to you. I was feeling sick the whole day, but, part of why I do it is for my kids, to show them what can be done. And part of that is showing, a brown guy can do it too. It's not just what you see on television. But I am about, not just like, I don't want to harp on diversity as well. I believe I have capabilities as well as an individual. And I think that should be the priority, really. But it is an added benefit, I think, of having that diversity. And not just in colour, in sex as well, in sexual orientation, in religion, just so you get all that perspectives. And that doesn't need to be in Parliament as an MLA, but that's at least communicating with those groups and talking to those groups. So, yeah, diversity is important. It's essentially my answer to that. And, I hope to be a pioneer in that part. I don't know how many brown MLAs Canberra's had in its history, but we'll see, yeah.
Thank you for showing the issues that you really care about in your community. And I guess given that you've expressed a lot of passion for those issues, I just wondered, and I've asked this before in other venues, what have you done in terms of, as a volunteer, to maybe draw on these issues and take them forward as a community advocate?
Yeah, look, first of all, I'm not the biggest volunteer at my time in Canberra. I help out at my local schools, volunteer for that. But my earliest memory of volunteering was for my church and going around and helping those elderly get to church in the mornings. We used to get up quite early and drive that free bus for them. And I think that what drives my concern about transport, because I see how the vulnerable in our community struggle to get around, to get places. It's not, we take it for granted. We don't catch a bus, we can just drive a car. But not everyone can do that. When I was younger as well, I did a lot of help with the homeless. I went around with a soup with Mission Australia, and that kind of was a bit scary to see people like that, and that's probably again drives my passion for public housing, because I don't know what I'll do if I didn't have a place to sleep, and that's just a scary thing. But no, volunteering is important. I think it's something we can all do to help each other. Like I said, I've done some in the past. I do it with my community. But yeah, it is important that we all kind of, and I think, like I said, the people are nicer here than they are in Sydney. Hope there's no Sydney-siders here, but the people are nicer. The people do help each other more. And I think we got that going for us, but we can only go so far if our leaders aren't doing their part. Cool. All right, thank you.
I hope people is feeling as good as I am about just the general diversity of thought and the passion of the people who are prepared to get up here and talk to you tonight. All right, let's continue rolling on. So next we're over to Anne-Louise Dawes. So Anne-Louise, sorry. Pardon me. Anne-Louise Dawes is a Canberran, born and bred. She was raised in the north and later built a life in the south. Anne-Louise has a long career in the Commonwealth Public Service, working for different and diverse departments, mostly where the toughest social policy problems exist. Over to you, Anne-Louise.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of the process to find the best candidates for the election for the ACT. I'll tell you a little bit about my story, my view of Canberra, and give you a sense of what I'm doing here tonight. I grew up in a Canberra that was cared for by the federal government, and when we put on our rose-coloured glasses to look back at the good old days, we remember lush parks, green, well-maintained ovals, better healthcare, better education, and some of that was possibly true. But we didn't have a say in where the money was spent in Canberra, and we didn't have a say about the decisions that were made in Canberra. So as a very young person, as we moved to self-government, I saw it as growing up as a city. I saw it about having control over where the city went. I saw it as control for our culture, and it ignited in me an interest in politics and an interest in the best for our city. How am I going with the mic, Thomas? It's okay. Canberra bashing was really alive and well when we didn't have self-government, and it still exists. But when we didn't have self-government, everyone thought we were a very expensive city to run. And I think that also ignited in me a passion to build a city to resist the Canberra bashing. I have a strong interest in social justice, and this has emerged from working in a variety of different government departments where I got glimpses outside the bubble in Canberra. And when you get a glimpse outside the bubble, it gives you a deep gratitude for living in the bush city. My work in government showed me that politics can be the key to change, and so much has changed throughout my career. Few women were in parliamentary office when I grew up, and when I started my job in the public service, there were no women in the senior management or executive positions. Over time, though, that has slowly changed, and my understanding of equality has changed. I still believe it's important to lift representation of women in politics and senior roles, but I can see that women are just the tip of the iceberg. In this wonderful city, where in 1977 we were the only city to vote yes to become a republic, where we easily voted yes on the plebiscite to recognise same-gender marriage, where we recently voted yes in a referendum to give a voice to Indigenous people, and no one was surprised. We showed that we're a city that's courageous about change. But I think the two major employers, the Commonwealth and the Territory, need to do more to employ from the populace. As I worked in various policy programs that had grants and programs to support the most vulnerable people in Australia, including at the senior executive level in refugee settlement, in migrant settlement, in disability, what was common to people was they just wanted meaningful employment. I don't think we see in our government workplaces in the ACT people from all walks of life. The bias, the barriers, the disadvantage, all of that inspired me to try and achieve the highest office that I could achieve to affect change. It's tough in Australia at the moment, and it's tough in Canberra. But we are the knowledge city, the innovation city, the test bed city. We have a chance to lead on solutions, as Thomas said, to complex problems. And some of the things I think we need to fix have come through tonight. It shouldn't be true here that our youngest have poorer outcomes for literacy than elsewhere in the country. It shouldn't be true here that if you have a mental health condition, there isn't enough help for you. It shouldn't be harder here than it ever has been before for you to own your own home. There are other things to fix, large and small, and I have been approached by other parties to run in this election and previous. What attracts me about the Independents for Canberra is a promise of driving positive change based on what people in electorates want. And while I talk about that, I acknowledge my colleague Fiona Carrick, who's here, an independent, not part of the Independents for Canberra, but a very passionate, hard-working person from Murrumbidgee who we understand will be running as an independent in this election and has been very supportive of us as we find our feet. I like the relentless positivity. It's a nice place to be. I want to be part of a movement that raises people's heads up to what is possible for the future. I have much respect for what successive ACT governments have done. I enjoyed not having prolonged lockdown during the pandemic. I did get a bit of a puffed out chest that we had the first drive-through testing station and we had it in a matter of days. I like that we lead on sustainability, and it's in that spirit of positivity that I would choose to participate. Strong, positive support, if elected, for initiatives that align with views and aspirations of the residents of Murrumbidgee. That the ACT lead on change and reform where it's required and holds other parties to their policies and promises. I think the candidates coming forward, as I think you agree, with the Independence for Canberra will restore our faith and our confidence in our political processes. They bring a new positive energy and a principled approach. I'm on board with the commitment that they have made and that I make, that not only in the lead up to the election we'll listen to the voices and be in our communities, but we'll respond to our communities and be present in our communities if any of us are elected. Questions?
Thanks, Anne-Louise. I don't think you'll be surprised that I'm going to ask you about your volunteer activity, and I think from talking to you, you've done a lot, but it would be good for you to just outline what you've done as a community advocate in a volunteer capacity.
Sure. Some of the things I do and have done over the last 5 to 10 years, these are things that I do without getting paid on top of what was an SES job in the Commonwealth. I like to work with people with disability in swimming, in particular quadriplegics, and help them get in the water and help them swim. I've read to students of the University of the Third Age whose vision is becoming impaired, and also lecturers of University of the Third Age who find it difficult to access their books on audiobooks. I established a program of tutoring to students in the Murrumbidgee area from refugee and migrant backgrounds, where parents are saying, what's a diorama? So I set up with Marist College that boys would ride their bikes and just help kids for a couple of hours a week to understand what was coming home. And I think the boys got a lot fatter with the offerings from the... I was for a number of years, while I wasn't with the St Vincent de Paul, I was on their books as someone who could go in where there had been domestic violence or where there were people who were uncomfortable with men coming into the house for whatever reason, and I would be the first to go in to settle the horses and make women feel comfortable. I'm kind of that. It's an age and stage kind of thing. You live in Canberra a long time. You've kind of got that network to have opportunities to support people in the community. Yes.
When you talk, I guess I'm making a general comment. When you talk about listening to the community. When you talk about listening to the community, there are different elements within the community. So, for example, not so long ago, the Y wanted to build a well-designed residence for older women who are increasingly one of the larger groups of homeless people in Australia. And you would think no threat to a local community. So they wanted to build it in Ainslie. And a group of Ainslie residents got together and funded a very expensive appeal to the AAT, I think, and based on some minor contradictions between the ACT planning laws and what was in the plan, they stymied the whole thing. So we've got a conflict between the residents of Ainslie, the rather wealthy residents of Ainslie, and the would-be, so to speak, residents of Ainslie, who would benefit from its excellent shopping centre, its closeness to Dixon, its closeness to Civic, and its closeness to the bush. So how is the party going to solve that kind of problem?
Thank you. That was a well-articulated question. And it is the challenge of all of us that at the start of your question you raised the key issue of how do you hear all the voices? And one of the things that Thomas has been working really hard with, particularly with exposure to the constituents that are coming through Senator Pocock's office, is to identify all the community councils that we can have conversations with to say who are the people we're not hearing from and how can we hear from them. We have been doing that and trying to form a majority view. So there's always going to be winners and losers. Where you talk about thriving villages and thriving communities, you know, that is something that ticks off so many boxes that the Independents for Canberra are aligned with in terms of their principles. Paula, who will be speaking next, and I live in Chifley, and it's the perfect example of a village where it's a thriving community. It was nicknamed Bondi during the pandemic when we were able to go out outdoors and gather. It's the perfect social inclusion project where passionate small businesses, passionate residents, and a good partnership with the local government over time has created that space. So personally, my hustle is to pull enough levers to get an outcome that suits a greater outcome for the electorate. Does that answer your question?
I guess the core of it is how do you deal with NIMBYism?
NIMBYism. That's not in my backyard, and I only learnt that this week. Not in my backyard. That's a really good question. And if you ask me personally, I do want to have the courage to educate people. I do want to see every side of the policy issue, as Thomas said, as Nathan said, as Sarah said. Every issue is complex. If you listen to enough voices and form a majority view, and the good ministers that I've worked for are the people that listen. As Thomas said, what he admires about Senator Pocock is he listens, he can be talked around, and if he disagrees, he'll articulate why. So my commitment would just be, if I disagree with a particular viewpoint, to articulate why, and to be talked around, if there's evidence, to a better way of doing it.
Hi, Anne-Louise. We'll go forward a bit in time. It's 2024. Hopefully you've won the election later this year, touch wood. What do you want to see your legacy to be if you are elected, and what positive impacts do you want to leave in Canberra for the future?
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping you asked me about small children, and I'd say, watch Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and the guy that goes through with a van and picks them all up. No, I'm joking. What I think the legacy is, I do feel that within this party, it rests on our shoulders the responsibility that if we get it right, it will take several terms. If we get it right as Independents for Canberra, if we'll build a brand that is true to the principles that we're espousing, that actually works hard, that actually, as Thomas says, suspends our own egos. And my experience of the party is that people will do that. There are no vested interests. They have worked really hard to find people who'll represent their communities. The legacy that I would want to leave, if I do one term, if I'm elected, if I do 2 terms, is that people who follow me will know what the brand is, and that more people will be interested in the Independents for Canberra, if that answers your question. And also children, van, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, yeah.
Oh, Annalise, and great speech and everything, and I'm highly impressed with all 4 of you so far. Well done. Tom mentioned a not impossible scenario, and that was, I think, last year 50% of Labor Green voters federally were considering independence. So the first part of my question is, it'd be nice, but it probably won't happen. You might end up with, say, Rattenbury and 8 Liberal, 8 Labor and 8 Independents, which would make for a very interesting assembly. But if it's sort of something like Rattenbury gets back and you've got 10 Liberals, 10 Labor and 4 Independents, who would you support into government? And how would you approach that?
That would be a nice problem to have if we got that many over the line. What our aim is to have a thriving crossbench. So we aren't aligned to any, We have started having conversations about the policies for each. Because our vision is to get enough to have a strong crossbench, we want to support the policies of Labor if they align with our electorate. And there's no commitment for Thomas and I, if Thomas is in Kurrajong and the electorate of Kurrajong want X and the people of Murrumbidgee want Y, we will just find a way to both represent our people. So it really, in a practical way, will come down to being in the Assembly. We will support an outcome that sees us cherry-picking the best of the policies and getting behind without contrived political tension or actual political tension to actually just get better outcomes for the ACT. So I personally don't have a position on. I'd be surprised if the Liberal Party get 10, but you know, in terms of the Labor Party and the Greens, I'm sanguine about who would lead government. Does that answer your question? Certainly, Mr. Emerson, please add something.
So, a couple of things. One is, I think part of the problem we have is that we know the Greens will never form government with the Libs, and so they have no power, no negotiating power. So someone earlier, sorry, I forget who mentioned, you know, they're intended to hold the government to account. Instead, maybe it was Nathan. Instead, they've become ministers and they are the government. We know nothing's going to change, and so part of the idea is if we can get a crossbench of independents, it creates pressure on whoever is to form government to actually perform. So that's the structural problem that we face, is two parties working as a coalition. We've seen it for the last, 23 years, but especially the last 12, and especially this last term. I think we would get together as, you know, the independents that we do get elected, we get together in a room, have a conversation about what happened during the election, what are the things that we heard. If you had a huge swing to one side or the other, it'd be very hard to say we're here to represent the community, but actually we're voting, you know, we're forming government with the opposite of what that swing was. So I think there's a lot to see between now and then, and it would be a huge, it'd be hugely to everyone's detriment for us to decide on the front end who we would support, because we'd be putting ourselves in the position the Greens have been in for the last 23 years. I hope that helps.
And would you vote differently, one from another?
On issues?
Both issues and on who takes government?
I think potentially. I mean, and this is where every conversation we have where there's disagreement, we come back to the principles, right? And that's the difference, is to not be bound. Yes, we've registered a party, but we're talking about independence following a certain approach. And to Anne Louise's point, if people in Murrumbidgee want something different from people in Ginninderra and from people in Yerrabee, then their representatives should be voting differently. What we see instead is that the vote's the same across the board, and that's why I think people don't feel like they have a voice through their local MLA. Sorry, Anne Louise.
Very well said, thank you. Yeah, and actually, it's not my job. I'm not a candidate, but I do just want to say that, you know, very early when there was news about this party, it was like, you know, stuff about Liberal stooges and stuff. I should tell you, like, as someone who's been managing the volunteer process and watching some of the candidates come up, the variety of people is incredible, you know. Yeah, there's a couple of people who used to be members of the Liberal Party. I've got members of the Labor Party. I used to be a member of the Greens. I think our campaign manager used to run for the Australian Progressives. You know, we're actually united by a set of core principles that we want to see our city improve in a variety of ways. So, and that's important. Look, we're up to our last candidate, Paula McGrady. So Paula McGrady's a Kamilaroi and Binghamton woman from Maree and Tumela from mid-north New South Wales. Paula has lived in the ACT for close to 17 years, and she calls this place her home and her community, away from where she originally comes from. When Paula first moved to Canberra, she worked for Doris Women and Children's Refuge, including several other youth refuges within the ACT as a second job. Paula worked full-time and currently as a casual worker with Canberra Rape Crisis Centre. Paula also worked as the Family Engagement Officer at Bimberi Youth Detention Centre for over 5 years. Paula loves to immerse herself in community and believes in staying connected to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community where she chooses to live, as it keeps her real to her identity and her upbringing and the responsibility to her community she values and how she can support her community as well. She's grounded always by her peers and the people she works with. They are the ones that support the most disadvantaged or in need across the ACT, and this is where Paula thrives the best. Over to you, Paula.
So as a very proud Kurrajong woman from mid-northern New South Wales, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the beautiful Ngunnawal people. And, you know, this land is it's so important to acknowledge the land on whose people, the people and the land that we're choosing to live on when we're not on our own country. So acknowledging that and acknowledging, you know, the generations of traditional people that cared for this land is very, very important. And thank you to everybody that does acknowledge. I think that's really, really important for all of us. So, thank you. So who am I? So who is Paula? So I've lived in Canberra since 2005. I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 8. I'm fortunate to belong to 2 exceptional parents. My dad has since passed, but I want to acknowledge them because when I do speak and you do get to know me a bit more, I want to acknowledge that I am a product of my mother and my father because of the attributes that they created in me, I'd like to think, 50-something years ago. So it's, you know, it's held me in great stead for who I am as a person and who I am today and why I'm here today. But I'll keep reading. So my dad, my father did things always by the book. And that's where I truly understand the meaning of integrity. And I learnt that at a very young age. My dad was a fettler on the railway in a small one-horse town. It just sat over the New South Wales-Queensland border. And my mum was a stay-at-home parent. I grew up in the bush. I grew up swimming in dams with leeches, getting chased by bulls in paddocks, catching yabbies by hand, riding bareback with my friends and getting bucked off. So I was real country. I had a happy childhood, a very happy childhood. Wasn't perfect, but it was a happy one. And it was full of love and it was full of safety. And that is so important to me. My mother lovingly shared her beautiful qualities with us, her honesty and kindness, and she's a funny woman. She's a very happy, cruisy person, and that's an element that she gave to me as well. I'm pretty cruisy. My life wasn't perfect. It had its cracks every now and then, but instead of falling through those cracks, I stood confident and I stood very proud of the solid foundation my parents created and instilled in me. So I want to talk a little bit more about the work I've done particularly since I moved here to the ACT in 2005. So I'm a person who does everything with passion. It's important to me to bring that with me in everything that I do. My first job when I moved to the ACT was with Doris, a Women and Children's Refuge. And I spent quite a few years working in that refuge, supporting women and with children who were leaving family and domestic violence. And the majority of those women were migrant women. There were women that didn't even speak English. That they were women that you had to have skills on interpreter services, utilising them. You had women and children that sat in a particular space where their visa, no one was responsible for them. So there was no income. But that refuge that I worked at provided support, financial support, provided all of the supports that, if you can imagine living in another country, you don't speak that language. You're escaping family and domestic violence. Where do you go? How do you get there? How do you know there is a service there? And these are the things that I'm really passionate about. Is family and domestic violence? Is sexual assault? These are the areas that I've immersed myself in since I've moved to the ACT. And again, every bit of work that I've done is always connected to community. And I don't just mean the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, but the ACT community, the diversity of that community. It doesn't matter what colour you are. You know, that violence affects everyone. But it does affect people very differently when you come from a minority group. So we have to understand those differences that cater for those people that need it the most. So very, very quickly, I've worked in youth refuges. I've worked at Canberra Rape Crisis Centre. I've worked on the crisis line. I've worked in government in child protection. I loved all of this work that I do, and I want to continue to go out there and advocate for survivors of these forms of abuse. We've got to call it for what it is. We cannot sugarcoat this in our community of the ACT. You know, we have to be comfortable with saying exactly what this form of violence does, what it is, and do something about it. Because I care about the people affected by family, domestic violence, sexual assault, and I know our community does. So we need to come together to make sure that we look after our community here in the ACT. And I bring experience and passion into this position. Very quickly, you know, I'm also a member of the elected body. I bring the experience of working with local government through our elected body, and that is advocating with the different directorates on a lot of issues. So I'm very familiar with what I need to do if I'm elected into this position, but those are my passions, and those are the things that I want to work on to make sure that our community is a safer community and that we all know where the help is and what those agencies are that can help us if any one of us is affected by any of these forms of abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. That was great. I have a question about places where services are delivered for vulnerable people. So specifically, Woden Community Service delivers critical services to disadvantaged people or, you know, people that need help for whether it's be aged or youth or disability. But recently, the Woden Community Service facility, or, you know, where they deliver their services in the Lollipop childcare, where they take short-term children when a parent needs it, it's been closed. And then they were moved over to Callum offices, that's being sold, and so they've been moved out of there. Apparently they're going to get a bit of space in Phillip in the trades precinct, but they tell me that it's not big enough. So Westfield has kindly given them a bit of space to, and that's the face of their services. So my question is, do you think that the government should provide a facility for critical services to be delivered in our community, or should the private sector be responsible for these sort of services?
I think the government's responsible for making sure that our communities are safe, and everybody that lives in our community has access to every diverse situation that they are in, because we are a diverse community. So the needs of somebody in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community will be maybe different to somebody in the non-English speaking background community. So we need to cater for all of those differences, all of those nuances in tackling all of these forms of abuse. Very different to supporting somebody who doesn't speak English that's affected by family and domestic violence. Very different needs. So we definitely do need the services out there to cater for everyone, children, young mums, families, young families, men, women, all of that diversity. So we need to be very inclusive, that we cater for that diversity to make sure that they feel safe at the end of the day in whatever their story is. And that's the beauty that I love about Canberra, is that I'm also learning the differences and the different needs out there. But violence is violence at the end of the day. How do we work together to make sure that if you've been sexually assaulted, do you know where to go? You know, do you know what happens with that process? Do you know what supports are out there? A lot of people don't know until it happens to them. You know, I'm somebody that, my first job was in youth detention. I love that. But I went there on one condition, that I couldn't give up my casual crisis job where I was on the crisis line at Canberra Crisis Centre, because I still love that job. So I had to, thankfully, I did work out at Bimbri, and I also was able to do that as a second job. Everything about what I do is making sure that people feel safe and making sure that people feel heard. And given what's happened just recently, these stories are not new to people like us and people that work in this sector. Do we know that, we have a specialist police, we have a specialist forensic medical team that deal with this type of abuse? Do we know as a community we only have 2 women and children's refuges for women and children escaping domestic violence in our community? So if we're going to be serious about eliminating violence in our community with our men, women, in particular our children, we've got to get serious about providing those supports and accommodations for them to go to. So I bring that expertise because I've seen where things are failing, where things are not happening. We shouldn't be having this conversation now. We shouldn't have 2 refuges. We should have more. Where are these people going to go? So this is why I am standing up here tonight, because this is a part of our community no one wants to talk about. No one wants to call it for what it is. But I'm not here to complain about it. I'm here for solutions. And I'm here to let our community know this is the dire situation of the ACT. Let us do something about it. Probably didn't answer your question, then I gave you a lot more, but that's how I am. I just am passionate. Thank you.
Paula, you've significantly undersold what you actually do in community and for the ACT government. You stated that you are a member of the ACT Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander elected body. You're actually the deputy chair of that elected body, and you're the ACT representative for the Coalition of Peaks. You work alongside multiple directorates of ACT government. where you have to be the representative as of the elected body for representing the ACT Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community. The experiences that you've garnished from being the reps for specific directorates, TCCS, ACT Health, what would you bring to the Canberra for Independence for Canberra party using those experiences? How would you use those experiences to drive what you would do if you were elected?
I would bring change to what I see is not happening. And I would bring that from the absolute grassroots of the work that I do. I'm not interested in the politics in politics. I'm interested in people. I'm interested in our next generation. I'm interested in again, everything that I do. I think it's so important to bring passion into your work, because when you bring that passion, you bring your heart. And you bring that realness that, you know what, I want my children to grow up in a better future. I'm so optimistic, it's dangerous for me sometimes that, I want this generation, the next generation, to be different in a lot of ways. And I know what works, I know what hasn't been working, and I know the people I need to talk to be able to bring along on that ride to make sure that our community is a safer community. So that's what I bring along with that wonderful experience I've gained working across these tough spaces. I can talk about family and domestic violence. I can talk about sexual assault because I've been there. I've been on that crisis line when that person's wanted to end their life, or that person has told me for the first time and they're in their 70s that they were abused as a child, or that young person that's 18 that's just been raped is sitting in a hospital having a forensic medical examination and she wants me to hold her hand. You bet I'm going to be there. And I'm going to be there for our community and make sure that it is safer for all of us and that we educate our society and we don't sugarcoat the ugliness and the insidious, I'm going to get tongue-tied, you know what I'm going to say, insidiousness of those forms of violence. So if I can make a difference there, then I'm going to, that's why I'm here.
Paula, I've got one for you, and it's a follow-up from that question, which is, what's your experience been like on the elected body? What's the interaction between ACT government and the elected body? What level of, I'm laying up a trashing of the government, just in case you're wondering. What level of power does the ACT government give the elected? I'd be curious to know about that.
Sure. The government have been working really well with the elected body. We have 7 members that are voted in by our grassroots community, and we go through a formal election process. We have directorates that we also work with. Mine are health and Transport Canberra and City Service, so I was interested about the bus conversations. But you know what? It's about building relationships. It's about those directorates getting to know us and us getting to know the directorates, and us making an impact that, say for instance, we need an extra bus route, or we need a bus route that's going to get our elderly people, easier access to a medical centre. Those are the kinds of conversations we have. It's very, very valuable. And look, and I use the term that it was like a baby version of the National Voice, because that elected body has been operating in the ACT since 2008, where those members that are elected by our community go in and advocate with the local government on issues that are affecting us, and we get to tell them what's affecting us. It's a reciprocal relationship. Things don't look very well sometimes. We're lacking in areas, but we have, and not the elected body, but, like child protection and all of those really tough issues, incarceration. But we have hearings in our 3-year term where we invite the Director Generals and people associated to those directorates were so. Justice, for instance, if there is if we've said to them, well, look, how did I use it? The example, the hearings are an accountability mechanism that we keep them accountable. So if they told us last meeting, that if we told them the community wanted chocolate ice cream served, okay, and they still continued to serve vanilla ice cream, and they didn't listen that we wanted chocolate ice cream, you bet we're going to publicly call it out, and we're going to say we want things done differently. We want you to listen to us, listen to what we are telling you, what will work in our community. So, poor example, sorry, but I love ice cream. But it's those kinds of examples that we do have a mechanism there that is independent to government. We get to ask any question we want, and we get to call accountability whenever we want. It's been operating for a while, but we're very fortunate to have that body for our community to speak on behalf of what we think is best. Still a long way to go. There's always going to be issues popping up, but the fact that we have that voice locally, and we've had it for a long time, we kind of get to say, well, let's direct our dollars this way because this is where we need. So it's utilising, our taxpayer dollars, I suppose, in where we say invest the money here. Let's talk about racism. Let's. It just is so broad that everything is really important about every element of the elected body, and I've had a great experience, and that experience also has brought me here today because I know what to expect to a degree out there of the work that we need to do, and that's why I thought, well, you know what, bring your skills and your passion and your experience to a broader scale of the ACT, and let the ACT community see that there's change that does need to happen in particular areas that I'm passionate about, but that doesn't, also omit other areas I'm passionate about as well. But it's all tied into our young people, and we want to give opportunities. But overall, I want to see a safer community. I want people to tell the real story about, what happens and what supports we have in our community, not until a time comes that we may need it ourselves. It's just about keeping it real. Yeah. Okay. That's me? Oh, one more.
Sorry, it's quite powerful. I feel really ignorant about a lot of the things that you were talking about, so forgive me if my question grows awry. I think, and I'm hoping you can correct me, but I think that there were two women refuges back in the 1980s when Canberra's population was 223,000. Proportionately, Canberra's population has doubled. Currently, we're sitting over 400,000. So that means if we had two women refuge centres back in the 80s, I don't know if we had one or if we had two, but that means that we've got half the number of facilities that we had back then. I don't know if there were more women refuge facilities back in 1980s. I often follow data sets, bit of a quirk that way.
Yep.
In 2012, and I guess it was probably a result of the GFC, but in 2012 through to 2018 or 19-ish, the level of incarceration for women was 6 times the level that it was prior to that date. So within a 7-year period, it had actually, like, an extra portion of that initial incarceration of women had happened and happened and happened and happened and happened and happened again. So I think when I followed the data sets for domestic violence and the call-outs for the police to call-outs, since 2018, it has massively increased. So I find it really hard to grapple with any sensitivity, or like with any sort of the magnitude of sensitivity about what you're talking about. Where are we at for the planning of women refuge centres in that light?
That's a really good question. That's a question, you know what, I'm happy to take up. If I am successful in this space, but even if I'm not, you know, there are issues that I'm still going to, you know, to pursue. But that's kind of a bit of a sad indictment on us, right? That we have this huge issue of family and domestic violence, and we talk about the ones that can be accommodated. What about the ones that cannot be accommodated, that have to stay in the situations that they want to leave? So it is a big issue out there. Our refugees should not even be spending their time having to compete for funding. We should be like saying, how much do you need? What do you need to cater for protecting women and children? The fact that a lot of time can be wasted within a refuge in applying for grants here, there and everywhere, we shouldn't be doing any of that either. If you've got an over-exhausted service that literally has to do everything to uproot a mother and children from a police station, take them to a property, supply all of the food for that property, supply all the furniture, all of the every need that you think your family, that you pay for with your family if you have children, everything that it costs to raise children, all of that's back at that police station, back at that house where that mother and children left. So who feels the brunt of having to rebuild a life for a mother and children? That refuge. So I'm ashamed that our refuges have to go and write a 50-page document to say, please give me some money, please help us. This is, you know, this is what we're funded for. It should be easy. It should be like, yep, how much do you need? And I would be so happy to be able to get up and talk more into detail so that our community understands the struggle that these workers in these refuges, women and children's refuges, young persons' refuges, which I've worked in as well, you know, men's refuges. Think about if you had to uproot your life, how much would it cost you? Who's paying for it? If you're a person that, again, doesn't speak English and you come from another country, but you don't have access to any finances because of your partner's visa or wherever you sit in that space, who's paying for it? He's certainly not. It's the refugees that are paying for it, so they have to save every dime, every cent to make sure that, you know what, they can put that young person who is from another country, he's an Australian citizen, you know, that, put him through school. Yep, you know what, he wants to be a vet when he gets older. Who's paying for it? That refuge is paying for it. So, yeah, I'd expect that, you know, we should. I'm ashamed to tell these stories because when I came here in 2005, this is where I was working. And these are the stories I'm telling from back then. I don't work in the refuge anymore, but I'm happily a part of the board. I shouldn't be telling these stories today. Things should have progressed from 2005. They haven't. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Hey, that's it in terms of candidate endorsement speeches and Q&A tonight. Can I please just ask you to give a round of applause to all the candidates? It's also a big commitment to come out on a Tuesday night post Anzac Day. It's basically winter anywhere else in the country, so well done to you too. I'd just like to repeat, we do have like a feedback box up the back. We're also happy to kind of have conversations if we get any feedback, not just about the candidates, but also about how we run these events. That'd also be really useful. And you can email. And if I can just kind of leave you on this, you know, a lot of us here, few of us here, are volunteers because we believe in the ethos and the need for change desperately in a lot of cases. So if you've heard from candidates tonight that you are inspired by and you want to see change, do consider volunteering. And that can look like anything, helping us out at a stall or getting really involved like a few of us are. We're going to need a lot of help to make serious change. So yeah, thank you for your time.